She is a true testament of MOSAIC's leadership in this sector. Here to kick off our conference, please join me in welcoming MOSAIC's Chief Executive Officer, Olga Stachova.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Does it mean that I get to actually move around with this mic? I hate standing behind these podiums, but thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you so much to Willie Lewis for setting us up and starting us off in a good way, and for his ongoing partnership with MOSAIC. So good morning and welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to see so many of you to join us for MOSAIC's 13th Annual Immigrant Professional Conference. Each year, there are hundreds of new immigrant professionals who gather at this event to share their stories, to expand their professional networks, and to boost their professional careers. And this year will not be different. We have an exciting lineup of speakers. We have ample opportunities for networking and to hear directly from employers. At MOSAIC, we work with hundreds of employers in Metro Vancouver, and we see every day the interest and an increasing interest of employers to hire immigrant professionals. And not only to hire the immigrant talent, but create meaningful retention and professional growth strategies to truly set up immigrants for success. And we'll continue the discussion today in this spirit to continue the trend that we are seeing. And we'll talk about the advantage that diverse and inclusive workplaces pose and create for businesses and for employers. We'll talk about the positive impact that diverse views and lived experiences and professional experiences bring to workplace performance and business innovation. Today's will truly celebrate the immigrant advantage. I know for my team and for me, this is such a highlight of the year. We love coming to this event. I also want to recognize the incredible amount of work it takes to envision and organize a meaningful event like that. And I would like to recognize the MOSAIC team that has been working tirelessly for months to make this happen. So please join me in a round of applause. So one of the key questions we inevitably come to at these annual events, and a question we hear every day from the clients we work with, is why can't Canada recognize my education and my experience? Why wouldn't they let me work in my profession? And I can tell you that there is no better time. We couldn't have timed this conference in a better way. You might have seen that earlier this week, the BC government introduced a new legislation, a legislation that is aiming to reduce the unfair barriers and the long wait times for immigrant professionals to be able to practice in their professions in BC. And the legislation is putting new requirements on provincial regulatory bodies, expecting increased transparency and efficiency in processing credential assessment, but also enhance the fairness, and among other things, removing the unfair requirement for Canadian work experience in these regulated positions. So there is a lot to celebrate this week, and this is a really good week for the immigrant communities in BC. And it is my privilege today to introduce our next guest and speaker as a man who made all of this possible. Someone who was not scared to roll up his sleeves and get his hands pretty dirty, diving into the good, bad, and ugly of credential recognition process in BC. And someone who took the time to talk to hundreds of immigrants, to hear the lived experiences, the stories, and to challenge the regulatory bodies that they could do better. So please join me in welcoming the Honourable Andrew Mercier, the Minister of State for Workforce Development in BC, and I'm afraid someone who will be known from now on as the man who tamed the credential recognition beast in BC. So please join me welcoming Andrew.
Well, I want to thank you for having me, and a big hand to MOSAIC for putting this on and for the work and for the years of advocacy MOSAIC has done. So So my name's Andrew Mercier. I'm the Minister of State for Workforce Development. I'd also like to start by acknowledging we're on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I couldn't think of a better time to be standing in front of a room full of immigrant professionals talking about credential recognition and talking about the challenges. There is so much opportunity in British Columbia right now. We talk all the time about the fact that we're going to need to fill 1 million jobs in the next 10 years, and 80% of those jobs require some degree of professional certification. We're depending on immigration to fill about 400,000 of those jobs. And the media and other folks out there talk a lot about a labor shortage, and I really think that's the wrong perspective to take. We don't have a labor shortage because we have enough folks in British Columbia now. We had 250,000 people immigrate to British Columbia in the last 2 years alone. We've added 250,000 people, many of whom have brought credentials and skills, but who are blocked from practicing in their chosen fields. We have a matching issue in terms of our regulatory bodies and certification. And so, a year ago, the Premier David Eby asked me to take a look into this. And I'll confess, I am an English-speaking male, domestically trained professional. I'm a lawyer. I don't lead with that. Not usually the most popular thing to bring up in a room. I didn't really have the degree of insight into what, frankly, I've come to believe is a mess of a credential recognition system. So I spent months going out there and speaking with immigrant serving organizations, advocacy groups, all of the professional regulators, and hundreds of immigrant professionals. And what came out of that, the starkest thing that came out of that for me, was I did not speak to a single person, including all of the regulatory bodies and their staff, that said, the system we have now for immigrant professionals is working. Everyone I talk to thinks it needs to change. And so when we came into government in 2017, we started to do a series of measures to help alleviate those pressures. We introduced the Credential Assessment Improvement Fund, which is a fund for regulators to fix their processes. We've got the Career Paths for Skilled Immigrants, of which MOSAIC is a participant. A few months ago, I announced a $1.5 million fund for immigrant serving organizations like MOSAIC to help folks with credentials. But I think the most significant things we've done are twofold. We introduced about a year ago an act, because health is a very important field. We introduced a piece of legislation called the Health Professions Act that sets up a superintendent of health. That is an office that will sit over top of the health professions and has the power and ability to oversee them in these processes. We've now taken, and we've shaved years off the amount of time it takes for an internationally educated nurse to get through the process, through getting rid of simple, common sense process barriers. And so we've taken that now, and we're extending that to the rest of the professions. So on Monday, I introduced a piece of legislation, the International Credential Assessment Act, that is going to affect 29 professions. And what it does is it sets up a superintendent of international credential recognition that has the oversight and the authority with self-regulating professions to enforce the act and to remove barriers for immigrant professionals. And the Canadian work experience requirement is a great example of a barrier that makes little sense, and frankly, no one has been able to explain or justify it to me on its merits. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with those barriers, but for those of you who aren't, there's a whole lot of professions that you can go through every step of the way, and you can get your competencies assessed, you can go through all of your educational assessment, take years and spend a lot of money doing that, and then get to the end and be told, great, now you need to find a Canadian professional that you can work under for 2 years at a cut rate, and good luck finding them. I spoke to one engineer that had to go to Prince George to find someone to take him on for $20 an hour, just so he could get his credentials recognized and move his family up there. And it really, one conversation I had that really sticks with me is I spoke to an engineer from Iran, and he had decades of experience engineering. And he came over here as an adult, had his family with him, and he went through the process to get his credential recognized, to get his engineering license. And he told me, he said, he had to work a different job. It took him a long time because he was supporting his family. And when he got to the end, he was told, you need to go get your Canadian work experience. And he said it was like a gut punch, because his 30+ years of engineering abroad didn't count for one single day of experience in Canada. That's not right. That's not fair. We're getting rid of it. And so that's the debate we're going to have in the legislature this week. And we're also putting limits on unnecessary repetitive language tests. I've spoken to so many people that write a language test when they immigrate. Yeah. And then write a language test again when they apply. And then that language test times out. So every 12 months going through the process, they're writing language tests again. It's ridiculous, it's insulting, and it doesn't get to what we need to get to. Just know that the folks coming behind you aren't going to have that same process. And there's going to be, we're streamlining it so that we can actually test the competencies and get away from this pile of red tape that just keeps people mired in hopelessness. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing and for the richness you're bringing to British Columbia. And you know, we want to get everyone working on what they're actually trained to do. So I'm looking forward to hearing some of the speakers. And I want to thank MOSAIC, because I can tell you this, the reason we're this far and why we're able to bring legislation like this forward is because of decades of advocacy and pushing from folks like yourself and from organizations like MOSAIC. So thank you so much and enjoy the conference.